what I'm going to be talking about here this morning. That happiness is not any endpoint. Do you notice that the word happiness is a noun? However, the descriptors for happiness are things like that she just sang. Finding something, tying your shoes, learning to whistle, whistling, loving, playing. They're all verbs or gerund forms of the verb. It's a process. Happiness is a process. Happiness is not a particular endpoint that we are seeking in life. And yet a lot of us seem to think that there are the endpoints that, like finding the right person at the right place, having the right home, having the best job, living in the right town, or whatever it is. It's kind of like a goal, an endpoint. Goals are wonderful, but you do all the living in the process of getting to the goal. And that's the way happiness is. About this idea of happiness, it's almost as if we can't really be happy. What is happiness? Where are you going to find it? We just know that if we can get the right things, meet the right people, hook up with the right person, so forth, then we'll be happy. And many of us that have lived very long know that that's not where happiness is. Happiness is a process. And that's one of the great discoveries that I made a number of years ago. I don't care what the Greeks or anybody else said. I want to know, what do you say happiness is to you? I didn't know. And so what do you do when you can't answer a question? Well, you always throw another question back at them. So I says, well, you tell me, what do you think happiness is? And he says, well, I've thought about this a lot, and happiness is loving and being loved. And I've never forgotten that. And I think he's absolutely right. But again, it's loving. It is a process. It's not arriving at a point where you can say, I am now loved. You are automatically loved infinitely by the universe itself. But the process of self-discovery of who you are within that universe reveals the love that is within you. Sometimes happiness seems to be so subtle, so elusive, that we wonder if it is ever really possible to achieve it. I read an article in an old issue of Psychology Today, in which the attempt was made through a survey to determine what it was that makes people happy. And 52,000 people filled out this survey and sent it back, the result of which was inconclusive. And I think the reason it was inconclusive, when you think about it, is every one of us has a little bit different idea of what happiness is, or we don't really understand what it's all about. But the one interesting response that they got, and they published this, of course, was a guy who filled out the questionnaire. And at the bottom of the questionnaire, he made a comment. He said, I think I'm happy. Please read this and verify. It is so typical of so many of us who allow our lives to be controlled by other people's criteria of what is right for us, who we should be, how we should behave, or whatever. You tell me now, by your standards, am I happy? It's kind of silly when we think about it, isn't it? And yet we do that an awful lot. Where is happiness found? I think it's useful perhaps if we define happiness, or at least look at some of the definitions of happiness. And I have some here. I'm not going to cover all these, there's a bunch of them here. But I like this one from Thomas Jefferson. He says, it is neither wealth nor splendor, but tranquility and occupation, which gives happiness. Isn't that nice? And where you experience your happiness. George Bernard Shaw said this, we have no more right to consume happiness without producing it than to consume wealth without producing it. Think about that one. Here's a great one from Dr. Ernest Holmes. It's a state of inner peace, a consciousness of the goodness of God. It is to be aware. And what this is really, to me, referring to is an awakening. It is an awakening process of the inner presence of reality in us, through us, and as us. the awakening to the truth that each of us is made in God's image and likeness. Okay, so let's take a look at this business of happiness. First of all, what is happiness not? There's a couple of things that I've written down here. The first is, it is not the acquisition of things or the pursuit of happiness or the pursuit of pleasure. I remember seeing a bumper sticker a while back that said, 5 secrets of happiness. Money, 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 money. And that is really the way a lot of people feel. I mean, we won't admit that because we know that there's all kinds of bad things about money. I haven't found them yet. But somehow or another we have a tendency to feel, don't we, that'll solve our problems. It's not money, 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 money. We're not going to find it in something out there. And yet we are conditioned to believe that we can. Madison Avenue and all of its advertising and promotion and so forth is continually trying to tell us what it is we need in order to be able to achieve happiness. Here is a little bit of text that came out of an article that I read in the USA Today some time ago, but I noted it. I wish I'd kept the whole thing so I could hold the page up in front of you and show you this. But this is what it says. Needless to say, you can't buy happiness. But for a mere $299 a month, you can lease exhilaration. Simply visit your authorized BMW dealer. Happiness also is not found in the avoidance of pain. I read a book one time, I still have it, I read another book or two also, and this book was called The Brilliant Function of Pain, and a lot of people are constantly struggling to get away from the pain, and admittedly, we want to relieve our pains, but a lot of the things that we do don't relieve the pain, it just puts it off, or prolongs whatever the process is that we're in order to be able to alleviate the pain. And if we keep running away from whatever the discomfort is in our life, whether it's psychological pain, emotional pain, or physical pain, oftentimes we find that we don't accomplish a whole lot. And the reason that we don't accomplish a whole lot is that we tend to give our attention so much to the avoidance of whatever the disturbance is that we don't have time to be created in the rest of our life. You know, there's a wonderful story about the dean, the former dean, the late dean of academics at Harvard University. Now, he died way back in the 30s, and I read this just recently in a more contemporary book. His name was LeBaron Briggs. And one day, a graduate student came to him who had not completed his thesis on time. And he said to the dean, he says, "Dean, I just didn't have time. I couldn't complete my thesis because I didn't have the time. I wasn't feeling well." And Dean Briggs looked at him and he said, "Son, there's something I want to let you know. It's time for you to realize that most of what gets done in the world has been by people who weren't feeling well." Wow! If some of us could have learned that early on and stopped trying to pass the buck. How often do we go through life trying to avoid some situation or circumstances that's uncomfortable or a little bit painful for us? You see, happiness is not found in anything out there. It's not found in the pursuit of pleasure. It's not found in the avoidance of pain. It's not found in the acquisition of things. Where is happiness found? Well, there are 3 things that I want to give you. Now, you can come up with your own 3 things or maybe your own dozen things, and everybody might have a little bit different idea. But these are 3 keys, I think, that can help us in finding happiness in our life, and they are these. Number 1, live purposefully. Number 2 is to appreciate your relationship with others and with life in total. And number 3, trust, trust, trust.